You're listening to the Leaping Choya podcast recorded in the Wrong Mountain Yurt in the Sonoran Desert.
I am falling away from this world. I am falling away from this world. You are calling.
We're starting on page 142. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thinking, certainty, and objectivity, beingness.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And are we explaining that we're redoing one?
So we did record something about this section,
Yeah.
but the recording was bad. There was a buzzing in it that is unremovable, so we're going to reread it and discuss it.
Yeah.
Yep. And okay, so I think we should get going, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead.
Thinking, certainty, and objectivity, beingness. To be shown. 1. How on this basis modern thought up to Kant is determined. 2. How on this basis the originality of Kantian thought arises. 3. How through a return to Christian tradition, together with an abandonment of the Kantian position, the absolute thinking of German idealism emerges. 4. How the incapacity for metaphysical thought in unity with the operative forces of the 19th century, liberalism, industrialism, technology, calls up positivism.
Industrialization.
Okay. 5. How, nevertheless, at the same time, the tradition of Kant and of German idealism is preserved, and a reappropriation of Platonic thought is attempted. Lotze and his value metaphysics. 6. How, going beyond all this and yet borne by it and tethered to it, Nietzsche confronts the most problematic formation devised out of 3, 4, and 5 by Schopenhauer and recognizes his own task to be the overcoming of Platonism, even though he does not penetrate into that domain of questioning and that basic position out of which alone a liberation from what was hitherto could have been secured for such a task.
Yeah, I feel like we should go back and read the section right before this to give a sense of where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Beingness and thinking.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Why don't
Sure.
we read that and then we can blend the two together?
Beingness and thinking. Though not further grounded, the priority and the anticipatory character of thinking. Greek word for logos. Ratio intellectus, are nevertheless concretized in the view of the human being as animal rationale, a view that originates in the initial experience of beings as such. Predelineated thereby is the possibility that character of thinking as guideline with respect to the interpretation of beings might all the more elevate itself into the unique place where beings are decided, especially if in advance and for a long time, ratio and intellectus have been compelled into a position of service, Christian faith. From this, indeed, there arose no new interpretation of beings, but only a strengthening of the importance of the human being as an individual, salvation of the soul. Thus came the possibility of a situation in which ratio had to judge as correct whatever was proper to faith, inasmuch as everything revolved around faith and faith exhausted all possibilities. Why should not also ratio at first, in conjunction with fides, claim the same for itself, become certain of itself, and make this certitude the criterion for firmly establishing something and providing its reasons, ratio as a reason? Now commences a transfer of the crux of thinking into the self-certitude of thinking. Veritas becomes certitudo. Therefore, thinking must first be placed into a formula, and what it claims to accomplish is now changed. Correspondingly, the determination of the beingness of beings changes into objectivity.
Okay, yeah. So, and then we have the section we read. So, I can't remember if we read this.
I don't remember either.
Yeah.
But it is a good lead-in.
Yeah. So in the little second section we read here, in stepping back from page 142 and for some lead-in, he talks about the priority and the anticipatory character of thinking, which he identifies as logos, ratio, intellectus. That's the Greek and then the Latin words for this aspect of thinking, or thinking as an anticipatory grasping. And this anticipatory character of thinking is concretized or sort of reified in the idea of the human being as animal rationale, as a rational animal, a view that originates in the initial experience of beings as such. Meaning there is an experience or a conceptualization of what beings are, and then placing human beings inside that cosmogony as the rational animal, and predelineated thereby is the possibility that character of thinking, as guideline with respect to the interpretation of beings, might all the more elevate itself into the unique place where beings are decided, especially if in advance and for a long time ratio and intellectus have been compelled into a position of service of the Christian faith. In other words, predetermined in this idea of the human being as animal rationale among the other beings is the possibility that thought, as practiced by the animal rationale, might be the very locus of where beings are decided as to, meaning deciding what has being, what are beings. And this is especially the case, he says, when the intellect or logos comes into service of Christian faith. So Christian faith sort of dictates to ratio what is allowed to have being and what is not allowed to have being. From this, from the Greeks all the way through the Middle Ages, no new idea of beings arose, but simply the importance of the human being among beings was reiterated. And thus, out of this came the possibility of a situation in which ratio had to judge as correct whatever was proper to faith, inasmuch as everything revolved around faith, and faith exhausted all possibilities. So faith was the epicenter of mentation in the Middle Ages, and yet reason, which is supposed to be opposed to faith, came to judge as proper what was faithful. So the ratio and faith entered a kind of dirty little bargain. And then we have this interesting last paragraph. In ratio coming to serve faith, why should not also ratio, at first in conjunction with faith, claim the same for itself, become certain of itself, and make this certitude the criterion for firmly establishing something and providing its reasons? So in other words, ratio kind of absorbed faith, you are what you eat, and became faith. And ratio became the exercise of establishing faith in itself, that others must have faith in it. And from this, we have at the beginning a transfer of the crux of thinking into the self-certitude of thinking. So we leave thinking leaves the task of seeking truth and becomes the task of establishing certitude. and therefore thinking must be first placed into a formula in order to establish certitude, and what it claims to accomplish is now changed. In other words, it doesn't claim to establish truth, it claims to establish certitude. Correspondingly, the determination of the beingness of beings changes into objectivity. So out of this drive of thought becoming about certitude, rationality becoming about faith in rationality and in its own thought, the beingness of beings changes into objectivity. Beings become objective. Thought grants beings the certitude of objectivity, and then we enter the current age in which objectivity becomes the psychological fetish of liberalism. So then, given this thinking as certainty and objectivity as beingness, we then enter this sort of list of, I would say it's a little primer on the history of German idealism from Kant through return to the Christian tradition, which in a sense is probably Hegel, and Kant is abandoned, but in unity with operative forces of the 19th century, such as liberalism, industrialization, and technology, positivism pops up, which is basically empiricism and the objective sciences of psychology and truth. And yet German idealism persists through Hegel and becomes Nietzsche, who attempts to invert German idealism on itself via some of Schopenhauer's ideas and begins to address the Platonism of German idealism. And Platonism, of course, is the world of ideas and forms having precedence over the manifest becoming world. And so Heidegger's just kind of saying he wants to think about how this whole ratio and fides getting in bed together plays out in German idealism. Yeah. But yeah, we should keep reading. I think there's going to be more to chew on.
Yeah. Okay. In this history, what becomes more and more self-evident and therefore remains unthought is the attitude of the guiding question, an attitude which possesses the sense of the formula, thinking, and objectivity.
And the guiding question is, what is being, right? What is being?
Yes.
What is being? Okay.
Even when Nietzsche brings forward Even when Nietzsche brings forward becoming in opposition to, quote, beingness, he does so while presupposing that, quote, logic determines beingness. The flight into, quote, becoming, quote, life is metaphysically a mere expedient, the last expedient at the end of metaphysics, an expedient that always bears signs of what Nietzsche himself recognized very early as his task, the inversion of Platonism. Yet every inversion is a fortiori a return to an entanglement in the opposite, sensible, supersensible, even though Nietzsche is very well aware that this opposite too must lose its meaning. For Nietzsche, quote, beings, the actual, constitute becoming, and being, quote, being, remains precisely the fixing and settling. Nietzsche is caught up in metaphysics from beings to being. He exhausts all the possibilities of this basic position, which in the meanwhile, as he himself saw for the first time and with great clarity, had become in all its possible forms the common possession and, quote, intellectual chattel, end quote, of the worldviews of the masses.
Yeah, so in this history from Kant through Hegel, through positivism up to Nietzsche and Nietzsche's attempt to invert Platonism, what becomes more and more self-evident and therefore remains unthought, meaning we don't think about it much because it's just so obvious, is the attitude of the guiding question. An attitude possesses the sense of the formula, thinking, and objectivity. So the attitude of the guiding question, the attitude of the phrase, what is being? That's what we're sort of talking about here. Even when Nietzsche brings forward becoming in opposition to being, he does so while presupposing that logic determines beingness. So what we're about to read is about 5 paragraphs of Heidegger sort of pointing out what he's pointed out before, which is that Nietzsche took a very important first step in upending the history of metaphysics, but didn't go far enough. Stayed, what Heidegger would say, sort of locked in his metaphysical framework. And so when Nietzsche brings forward becoming in opposition to being or beingness, he's, in a sense, playing the Hegelian game. Hegel, what Hegel brought to the whole picture was the idea of becoming, or negative and positive, being and non-being, the dialectic, the opposition of things rotating into new things via sublimation. And this was seen as, antithetical to Platonism, where being is just, or beings are just reflections of an abstract, objective beingness, or formal beingness. And Nietzsche's mistake is presupposing that logic determines beingness. I guess that's his metaphysical error. The flight into becoming is metaphysically a mere expedient, the last expedient at the end of metaphysics, an expedient that always bears signs of what Nietzsche himself recognized very early as his task, the inversion of Platonism. So again, life, becoming, these are, after Hegel, these are phrases that indicate a kind of, not subjective, but dynamic, real-world, fluxy becomingness, where nothing becomes something and something becomes nothing, and they are the same thing, and being and not being are flowing into each other. Very different than, again, the reflection, all of life being more of a static reflection of ideal forms. Yet every inversion is a fortiori or a return to an entanglement in the opposite. So Nietzsche got tangled up in metaphysics, in trying to escape metaphysics. For Nietzsche, beings constitute becoming, and being remains precisely the fixing and settling. So he stayed stuck in the idea of beings and in that attitude of the guiding question, which, really Heidegger would say, and he never made it to bang or the event. He's caught up in metaphysics. He exhausts all the possibilities. But the last thing, he exhausts all the possibilities of this basic position, all the possibilities of this basic metaphysical faith position, which in the meanwhile, as he himself saw for the first time with great clarity, had become in all its possible forms the common possession and intellectual chattel of the worldviews of the masses. So essentially, this being-based metaphysics had become the intellectual property or intellectual slaves of the worldviews of the masses. And this is liberalism. This is just that thought, logic, being, objectivity, thinking as certitude had become the intellect. In a sense, the objects of the intellect had just become tools or possessions of the intellect to throw about and determine and own and trade and etc. To the likings of the liberal masses. Right?
Yeah, totally.
So we see an evolution of the way being and thought relate to each other. And the end of this evolution is that being becomes objective, thought becomes the establishment of, or the obsessive establishment of certain objectivity, and ideas become intellectual chattel for the liberal masses who view themselves as masters of thought and have the same kind of controlling, vindictive, possessive attitude toward their ideas that a master might have of his slaves or of his possessions. Again, didn't need to be this way, but this is history of ideas, history of epistemology that Heidegger's giving us and helping us see what thought has become, even though thought could be different things than it is. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. The first step toward the creative overcoming of the end of metaphysics had to be carried out in such a way that in one respect, the directionality of thinking is maintained, although in another respect, it is thereby at the same time radically raised beyond itself. To maintain that directionality means to inquire into the being of beings. The overcoming means to inquire first into the truth of being, into what never did become or even could become a question in metaphysics.
Yeah, so what he's saying is as we start to question metaphysics, it's important to maintain the directionality of our thinking in its inquiry into what the being of beings is, but to then finally to make the next step to actually really escaping metaphysics and going beyond it, we have to inquire first, even though our thought remains directional as to looking into beings, we need to first inquire into the truth of being, into what never did become or even could become a question in metaphysics. So we need to preempt metaphysics or move to the side of metaphysics and ask about the truth of being in order to eventually move beyond metaphysics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This double character of the transition, the attempt to grasp, quote, metaphysics more originally in order thereby to overcome it at the same time, is altogether distinctive of the, quote, fundamental ontology, end quote, of being and time.
Yes, in my prior book I wrote about this, yeah.
That title came from clear knowledge of the task, no longer beings and beingness, but being. No longer, quote, thinking, but, quote, time. The priority no longer given to thinking, but to being. Quote, time as a name for the, quote, truth of being, and all this as task, as, quote, still on the way, end quote, not as, quote, doctrine and dogma.
Yeah, so he explains the title of being and time a little bit here, and it says, what I was getting at with that title was we need to stop looking at beings and beingness, so thinking we know what a being is, and ascribing essences to those beings. And instead we need to ask the question of what is being, what is this thing that we've been ascribing to things and throwing around all these many years, and no longer asking about thinking, but we're going to think about time. So instead of thinking, time, in a sense, it replaces thinking. So, you can think of that as, thinking is the cognitive recalculation of concepts about our perceptions. And we go to it, we use it to make, to, in a sense, establish propositions and establish logical certitudes, and we use it to construct phantasms of meaning and being. And what Heidegger is saying, instead of looking to thought for the creation of those phantasms, we should look to time. We should look to the manifestation of being over time, and the I would say, like the timely characters of being for finding those phantasms. And we're not going to give priority to thinking. We're going to give priority to bang, which is again sort of the same thing as time. Bang is the event in time. And this is a doctrine. This is not a doctrine or a dogma. It's something that is in the process. So go ahead.
The basic position that presides over Western metaphysics, beingness and thinking, with, quote, thinking, ratio, reason as the guideline and anticipatory grasp for the interpretation of beingness, has now come into question, but by no means such that thinking would simply be replaced by, quote, time. Everything would merely be intended in a, quote, more temporal, end quote, and more existential way, and otherwise would make no difference. Rather, precisely that which in the first beginning could not come into question has now done so, truth itself.
Yeah, we're going to think about truth in terms of time, not in terms of thinking. We're not just going to have more temporal thinking. We're going to actually locate truth in time, not in thought. Go ahead.
Now everything is different and is becoming different. Metaphysics has become impossible for the truth of being. The essential occurrence of being is first and is not merely the, quote, whereto a transcendence is supposed to attain. In play here, however, is not only the inversion of the previous metaphysics with the more original essential occurrence of the truth of being as event. The relation to beings also changes, no longer that of, quote, what is laid down underneath, end quote, and, quote, condition of possibility, end quote, i.e., quote, what lies underneath, end quote. Being essentially occurs as the event of the grounding of the, quote, there, and itself determines the truth of the essence out of the essential occurrence of truth. The other beginning transforms being by leaping into its more original truth.
Yeah. That's where we left off, right?
Yeah.
So now everything is different and is becoming different as we move from beings and beingness to being, and from thought to time. Metaphysics has become impossible because there is no transcendence to which we're attempting to attain. The forms have been torn down. Beingness has been seen for what it is, which is simply the result of reason assigning a realm of faith to itself and the demands of faith and certitude. Metaphysics has become impossible, for the truth of being and the essential occurrence of being is first, and is not merely the whereto a transcendence is supposed to attain. It's so the truth of being and the occurrence of being; these are not objective, transcendent realms that we're seeking to land ourselves in. It's the timely, spatial, manifold that we are faced with that preempts thought and is the locale of truth. In play, however, is not only the inversion of the previous metaphysics. We're not just inverting the old metaphysics, but the more original essential occurrence of the truth of being as event. The relation to beings also changes. So beings, the relation to beings also changes. No longer that of what is laid down underneath and a condition of the possibility, or what lies in. So beings no longer, in a sense, he's saying, are the substratum or the fundament or the grounding of all things. Beings are not what lies underneath and provides a condition of possibility for life. The truth of being as event is where we're looking for that which lays down underneath and provides the conditions of possibility. Being essentially occurs as the event of the grounding of the there, which is a nice definition of being. We have a little definition of being there, and itself determines the truth of the essence out of the essential currents of truth. It determines the truth of the essence. So in the there of the event coming to be grounded, the truth of the essence is established out of the essential occurrence of truth that occurs in the grounding of the there. The other beginning, which is the beginning he's attempting to foment in this book, transforms bang by leaping into its more original truth, it leaps into Bang's more original truth, away from beingness and beings. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's the passage. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things we talked about in the botched recording, well, we talked a little about Marxism, just leaning back into that section on Kant and the positivists and the little mini history of German idealism there. We need to remember that he's sort of linking German idealism with Christianity, but via Hegel, I would say. And of course, we need to remember that Hegel becomes Marx, and Marx becomes Marxism, and Marxism becomes liberalism. So he makes a real conceptual historical link here between the revolt against Kant via Hegel as a rejuvenation of Christianity that then gives birth to Marxism and liberalism, linking liberalism and Christianity in a very real way. And that's definitely something that I would say non-liberal thinkers discuss, is that actually the conservative world is really torn. Is Christianity, is liberalism just a further manifestation of Christianity? Is it just more Christianity? So, is it a world controlled by guilt, by universal empathy, by lifting up of the meek against the strong, Christian ethics, by order, by faith, by all the things, by the religiosity of the priests, aka the professors? Is liberalism just a secular Christianity? Then there's other Christians, other conservatives who are probably the more Christian conservatives, who would say that liberalism is an abandonment of Christianity, with its free sexuality and sinfulness and emphasis of worldly goods and of course its open renunciation of Christianity. So conservatives are torn as to the relationship between liberalism and Christianity, but Heidegger's here making a pretty common linkage of the idea that liberalism is in a sense just a new secular Christianity, and the connection there that Heidegger draws is really interesting, is between reason and faith, and how reason, in becoming the authority over what faith is, then just sort of subsumed the idea of faith, and now we have what the current American liberal intellectual world, in which that smells so rankfully of religiosity and faith in itself, and we end up with liberalism and its demands of adherence and dogma and an insistence on a faith in its principles and its ideas and its methods and its correctness. That's where we get what the current liberal stench.
How can you say again? I know he said it. I know you said it too. But just how truth, how veritas becomes certitude. Certitudo. How did that happen? I feel like thinking became finding certainty, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Heidegger probably would say that the time of thinking, seeking truth, probably preceded the Christian order of faith and reason getting in bed together. That he would probably, I would think he would say that what the Greeks were largely interested in the beginning of philosophy was finding truth. And as soon as faith took over the world and reason came to serve faith, then thought stopped really looking for what was true and instead started establishing certainties. So basically, you can think of certainty, I would say, as having no concern for truth and more concern for dogma and fact. or fact. I mean, ideological fact. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our accusation against the Middle Ages, is it was a truthless time. It was a time of faith, where you're just supposed to have faith regardless of what you think the truth might be. You have to just have faith because you're either being forced into it or it's just better for you. It's going to be a better life, and I think Heidegger is saying, what happened is in truth being pushed aside and faith coming to rule the world for so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, is that then when reason emerged in the 1700s, the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, blah blah blah, reason never really returned us to the truth. What it returned us to was, because of its corrupt relationship with faith, it actually just became a machine for demanding faith in itself, and it never lost that kind of that practice of being about the establishment of faith, which again means being antithetic to truth. It's much more important to remain faithful to the order than it is to see the truth, think the truth.
Can you have certainty and objectivity without faith?
I mean, it seems to me that Heidegger would say that those are terms, those are forms of thought that are only really pertinent,
right,
or possible in a world where reason has become faith.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah. We touched on Marxism a little bit. Faith. I mean, yeah. The university as the present day cathedral, monastery, religious order, but I think the real interesting thing, I think, is as we shift to think about anxiety and intrusive thoughts, and as we talked about last time, is this idea of thinking becoming time, and thinking being certitude, and reason being faith. To me, all those demarcations that he makes, those definitions, call into question this kind of idea of intrusive thought and what anxious thought is. And so I'm going to ask you again. I asked you in the first one, how would you describe the process or the sensation of thinking when you're in the throes of anxiety versus when you're not? And of course, that begs the question of, are you aware of two forms of existing, one being in the throes of anxiety and another not being in the throes of anxiety? And how does thinking vary in those realms if you are?
I mean, I was just thinking today that I feel like intrusive thought is actually just like we've quibbled with the idea of intrusive, but also I feel like the word thought is also in a way a misnomer, in that I'm not sure either of those words are actually accurate.
Intrusive or thought?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So why not?
Well, I mean, today what I was thinking about is what it really, for me, what it is it's basically words in my head, which I guess is maybe technically thought, or maybe not. But words that I hear in my head that are, for me, they're catastrophic. So they're just very negative. What's the worst thing that could happen? And then I'm not, we've talked about, I don't know necessarily where they come from, other than it just being a worry about a negative thing happening. And And so, yeah, I'm not sure if that's thought. I'm not sure. I don't feel like they necessarily come from like within me. I feel like they are repetitions of things I've heard or seen or read, as we've discussed, projection. Yeah, that's what I was thinking today, which is obviously probably not what I said a week ago.
Yeah. I mean,
but I do actually have my notes written down too from then as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think somewhere in there is this idea of intellectual chattel of the worldviews of the masses and the contemporary approach to thought as being sort of the domain over which a master exercises her or his power. And I think that, again, this is a way of thinking that we've inherited. Thought is something we've inherited. How thought happens, what thought is, what we're supposed to be doing when we're thinking, what we are doing when we're thinking, what the content of our thought is, and how we're to think of it. This is all inherited by us via the liberal order, and it seems that there's something really interesting vis-a-vis anxiety about this idea of the intellectual chattel, about thought as master, thought as a controller of property, because objectivity, in a sense, just becomes objects, and objects are controlled and owned. And it seems like with intrusive thought, what we can say is that an intrusive thought is kind of like a thought that upends your sense of which are your thoughts and which are not. So again, that's intellectual chattel. That's, I have thoughts that are my possessions. There's those safe ones, the ones I own, the ones I control. They do exactly what I say. I can rely on them. They live in my house. They're cool. I'm cool with them. I tell them what to do. They do it. I say jump. They jump. They're under your purview, right? But then these other ones come that are not under your purview, and they intrude. They're like thieves in the night, that just really disrupt your concept of intellectual chattel. They steal your thoughts. They insert rogue thoughts. They're like those one of those birds that inject their chicks into other birds' nests, right? And those birds get raised by other birds, and so the injecting birds don't have to do any parenting. It's really sly. It's like that. And so,
can you talk more about intellectual chattel? What that means?
Well, he brings it up in the context of Nietzsche's realization about metaphysics. And so let's look really quickly. It says here, Nietzsche is caught up in metaphysics from beings to being. So Nietzsche remains stuck in a kind of Platonic view of the world. He exhausts all the possibilities of this basic position. So he really looks intricately into its implications. This basic position, which in the meanwhile, as he himself saw for the first time with great clarity, had become in all its possible forms the common possession and intellectual chattel of the worldviews of the masses. So metaphysics, from beings to being. So what does that mean? What that means is, first, you know what beings are. So this is the liberal metaphysical cognitive position. Okay? You know what beings are. You don't question that. You know what they are, and you assign them a certain ontological status. Okay? You don't question being. You don't question what beings are. You don't question how you ever arrived at the idea of what beings are and what are not beings. You just have this ingrained, instinctual, reflexive approach, and it's called, I know what beings are, and I'm going to stick to that. And from those beings, you then establish being, or essences, or you start to determine what's common to them all, and you start to represent them, and then you start having cognitions and, again, phantasms and representational worlds in which being is sort of is what you're relating to. And so Nietzsche stayed caught up in that metaphysics, and really in that process of beings to being, which is how he describes metaphysics. That process is what he calls, in all its possible forms, so in every way it can become formulated and formalized, the common possession and intellectual chattel of the worldviews of the masses. So this metaphysical process of beings to being becomes an intellectual possession. It becomes something that we own, and it's a process that we rely on, and it's how we operate. And again, it makes thinking, it makes beings, it makes objectivity our possession, our chattel. Right? And that's important, because instead of having an attitude to thought that, like, oh, thoughts come and go. I don't own it. I don't own them. I don't know where they come from. I don't have any claim over them. I'm not establishing their person, place, and thingness. I'm not putting any legality around them. I'm not making ontological claims about them. I don't even know what it is. I don't know what thought is. I don't know what the objects of thought are. I'm not really thinking about thinking in that way. Instead, you just have a world in which we're trained to have thoughts. I mean, think about the phrase, to have them. The way we have a car and a girlfriend and a disease, right? They are our chattel. They are our slaves. So they need to act down, right? And then these intrusive ones mess everything up, or non-liberals mess everything up, right? Like that's why you have this, this derangement syndrome, this frenzy, this desire to kill and suppress non-liberal thoughts, because it's just messing up the intellectual chattel of the masses. But more personally, for you and anxiety, if your thoughts are something that you assume you own and you control, which means you also control the environment in which they exist, because you need to make sure they don't run away or strange ones don't sneak in. That's an incredibly anxiety-inducing situation.
Yeah.
Isn't it? That's a real clear picture of why liberalism is anxiety.
Yeah.
Because it literally has, its thoughts are like a little slave camp.
Because your thoughts are intellectual chattel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you have the paranoia of the slave master, the paranoia of the owner, and I mean, it can be a little freaky to own a lot of stuff in a world where there's a lot of thieving, but imagine trying to own thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit why Marxism is relevant. It's that kind of the material. I don't know. I try to avoid Marxism in every way, but the materialism. The conscious. I think one of the tenets of Marxism is that the material conditions of our world determine our thinking, and we can only think according to those material conditions, and that's that's a dogma. That's actually, I would say, that's ascribing as a disease what is in fact a symptom of the faith. Liberals can only think according to the material conditions. Their thoughts are reflections of material conditions. Not as an aberration, but as a core element of the way liberalism operates. And this goes back to something I've said before, where it's like, if we really look at how we think, we've adopted all these thought patterns from thousands of years of psychological, philosophical, and spiritual teachings, so many of which were developed in times when the material conditions were so aberrantly different than our own, that we've come to absorb their concerns into our thinking when our thinking doesn't need to have those concerns. And again, I'm talking about sort of, you know, if you have a whole thought structure that's developed in a world where there are like no cops, you know, and no national armies, and you live in incessant fear, then your thinking is going to take on a lot of really harsh moralistic qualities in order to impress upon the world some kind of safety order, right? But once that safety order is actually established later in the decades and in the centuries, you don't need that in your thought anymore, but yet you've adopted that kind of thought policing, or the purpose of thought is to inject morals so that people can, you know, hopefully someday spread the idea that maybe we shouldn't be killing and raping each other all the time, you know? So thought was a desperate attempt to bring some kind of peace and security to the world. And now that there is a lot more peace and security, thought is still ticking away at that desperate venture.
Yeah.
So, you know, certitude, right?
Yeah.
Go back, answer my question. Like, is there a life in the throes of anxiety versus life not in the throes of anxiety? Is there thinking? When you're thinking, are you sort of like, okay, I'm thinking clearly now versus, oh, I'm thinking anxiety now? This is anxious thinking, this is clear thinking, or is thought not really work that way? And what is thought?
Yeah. I mean, I would say I definitely feel that that some thoughts feel like they come from that they're anxiety, and some thoughts are not, and they do feel more like clear thought. And that's actually I think a fairly common thing for like anxiety literature to say, and I like this idea that it's like, oh, that's an anxious thought, or that's a happy thought, or that's like to label your thoughts is like one of the practices. But I would also just say, like, I mean, I feel like it's not just the content of the thoughts, but like sort of the energy behind it, the feeling it gives, like there are all these things that come along with it. But then what is thought is a good question.
Well, it's really interesting too, because it's like, as I hear that, I think, oh, that's an anxious thought, that's a happy thought, that's a clear thought, that's a worrisome thought, that's a celebratory thought. All these kinds of thoughts, like my immediate reaction was like, oh yeah, those aren't thoughts though.
Yeah.
Because like Heidegger would say that thinking is, Heidegger would say thinking is deciding. Yeah. And an anxious thought isn't deciding anything. It's just regurgitating or echoing an anxious sentiment. A happy thought is just echoing happiness. Yeah. A clear thought is just echoing a sense of clarity. This is not thinking. Yeah. I think somewhere in here, you know, he says, so he says, the title Being in Time came from clear knowledge of the task, no longer beings and beingness, but being. So we're not going to think about beings and beingness. We're going to analyze being. So that's a very post-liberal idea. No longer thinking, but time. Mm-hmm. So again, I would say that's a little bit in line with the idea of deciding, meaning an anxious thought is out of time. Mm-hmm. It's an already established sentiment that is clothed, in thought, but actually isn't thought. The nakedness underneath is just anxiety, but it's posing as thought. And the way to make it thinking is to put it in time. And that anxiousness, that happiness, that clarity, whatever kind of thought you're having, that's not thought. Mm-hmm. Thought is time, meaning, in a sense, your head is in a different place from moment to moment, and how you get from moment to moment and decide about what moment you're in and what the event is that is represented by the there-ness of that moment, that's thought. And the dressings of thought, anxiety, clarity, worry, joy, whatever they are the things that actually pull thought out of time.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
But I think that this ratio fides thinking triangle, it's like if you're raised to think that reason, or what we might call the thought process, has as its MO, it's raison d'etre, its primary reason for being, the establishment of the faith in thought, then you're really stuck. You're really stuck in thought. Thought becomes a anxious, paranoid obsession with establishing the certitude of thinking and thought, which removes it from time, removes it from bang, and makes it a nervous possession. And so then we see where anxiety comes from there.
Yeah.
So the goal, I guess, is to get out of this thought as certitude, to get out of this reason as faith, to get out of this beings to being metaphysics, and get into the timely truth of bang, and understand that that's thought. So in a sense, you don't know what thought is. We don't know what thought is.
Yeah.
But and more importantly, we've been convinced that thought is something that has nothing to do with thought and isn't thought.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
And in that fake thought, anxiety rises up. Anxiety is the symptom of fake thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote down last time that it shows that thought is not yet found.
That thought is not yet found. Exactly.
Anxiety or intrusive thoughts or...
Thought is not yet found. That's right. You mean we haven't figured out what thought is yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about how instead of thinking time, because time is tough too. I mean, that's a...
Sorry, talk a little bit more about what?
How instead of thinking time, like how does that work? Well, actually, I'm curious.
Well, let's take the announcement today, right?
Okay.
The announcement today about Tylenol and pregnancy.
Yes.
Trump and RFK Jr. announced that they're going to they're going to encourage the Health and Human Services, the medical wing of the U.S. government, I can't remember what it's called, NIH or whatever, to tell doctors that they should alert women of the possible links between Tylenol and autism, and encourage them not to take Tylenol or only take it when they absolutely need it, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was announced today, and we have had already a large amount of liberal cacophonical screaming and hatred for that occurrence. And I would say in that we have a nice little graphic of the difference between thought and time. So thought for liberals is the exercise of their certitude and the establishment of the faith-based arms of their rational church. And this announcement by obviously two political opponents is absolute anathema and apostasy and heresy in their view. They do not want to hear that it might be true. And you and I have no idea if it's true or not. Like, we have no idea, right? I've not studied the science whatsoever. There must be some people who think that there is some basis for this caution. And there's a huge long list of drugs that are contraindicated for pregnant women. And that's as a result of studies. And there are some sets of studies might be more robust and clearer than others. Some might be a little like, it's like Zofran, right? The stuff for nausea when you're pregnant. Like, yeah, there's a couple studies that show this, and somebody had to make the call at some point to say Zofran might not be safe. So now they've just said Tylenol might not be safe. But because it's coming from the devils in the liberal Christian order, it is just completely wholesaledly rejected. That's thought. That's liberal thought. Liberals are facing that announcement with what you might call liberal thought, which is actually just the crushing of others' ideas. That's all it is. So what's time? Well, time is, okay, so that occurred, right? Like Trump and RFK Jr. announced that. Now it's going to be spread out to the doctors, and the doctors are going to review that, and they're all going to talk to the pregnant women, and the pregnant women are going to think about that. And then there's probably going to be some more studies, and then there's going to be 95 million articles written, and more research, and more arguing, and more thinking, and maybe in 4 years they'll reverse the decision. Who knows? That's time. That's time. No, but if you look at that time, that's actually thought. That's the thinking through of this event via other events. And this string of events that will be the whole universe of attempts to understand the relationship between Tylenol and autism will be thought. But it's really time. So thought takes time. But liberalism has already stated that it does not want that time to occur. It does not want that thinking to occur. So it's still thinking. Think of it as thinking through. Thinking, thought as impressed faith versus thinking through as a non-anxiety discovery process. And see,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, liberals hate thought as time because that's anxiety inducing.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that just as you were like giving that narrative, I was like, wow, when I'm thinking of some of our friends who made responses, like that's totally how I respond to my intrusive thoughts. I'm like, go away right now. You're terrible. This is terrible.
I'm unfriending
you. I don't want to follow you.
Yeah.
If I could, I would never hear from you again.
Never hear from you again.
Yeah, exactly. That's like exactly how I feel about
You're
that.
evil. I want you off my timeline.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
As opposed to, okay, let them develop, let them happen.
Yeah.
And so that we've discovered that there's a relation between thought and intrusive thought, and the sense of what thought is or what thought should be. And so if thinking is time, then in a sense, when the anxious thoughts occur, the intrusive thoughts occur, thought as faith-based reason just attempts to crush those intrusive thoughts. Because that's the way faith-based reason acts. Yeah. That's the way liberal thinking acts. That's its initial ingrained, entrained, habitual response to anything that opposes it, is to kill it. Time would say, okay, thought is actually time. So anxiety thought has occurred. Let's time this. Let's time it. Instead of think it, or let's time it out. Let's think it through. Let's let it go in time and consider that thinking about it. So we lose the instinct to crush and push away, which obviously does not work, right?
Yeah.
And now we say, actually giving it time to exist in an ecosystem in which thought is not trying to kill it, might just be thinking about it. Because in a sense, it is thinking about it, because as it flows over time, and it occurs at 12:01, and now it's still there at 12:03, and it's still there at 12:07, and you're observing it, and you're relating to it, you're having feelings about it, you're sensing it, you're considering it, you're looking at it from different perspectives, blah, 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 all the kinds of things your mind can do. You're thinking about it, but not as an exterminator, but as an observer. So, and that's part of the anxiety literature too, isn't it? Just observe the thought.
Yeah.
But I think that what's missing is when we say observe the thought, let it exist in time, that's a good idea, but not if it's occurring within a head that is still obsessed with liberal thinking, because that compulsion to destroy it is still there. You're just sort of calling off that compulsion for a little while,
right,
and hoping it'll go away, which is just another form of killing it. Hoping it'll go away is just another form of, trying to destroy it.
Yeah.
In your head.
Yeah.
It's so, but actually the observing of it, the letting it go through time in the absence of a thought that views all thoughts as necessarily intellectual chattel, and as having to behave, can become thought, time thought. So we see then, we now see just the infinite number of cognitive habits that we have that play into how we face and deal and feel and think about whatever anxiety throws our way. It's not the anxiety, it's our reaction to it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to do that, but yes. Like, if you really don't like it, how do you let it just exist? I guess you're not supposed to not like it.
Do you want me to start making a list for you of all the things I don't like that I let exist? See, it's a very good question you just asked. If you don't like it, how do you let it exist? That is the heart of liberalism.
I know it is.
That is the heart of it.
Yeah.
It's the heart of Marxism. It's the heart of medieval thinking. There's the good people and the devils, and you must burn them at the stake. That's the reflex that must be eradicated.
Absolutely. It's like this like really intense, immediate dislike, and like it's not okay to be there.
Right.
That's always been,
Yeah, the post-liberal mindset is really actually the composure and the sophistication and the maturity to be totally comfortable around what you don't like.
Yeah.
And have no homicidal attitudes toward it. To think it, let it exist in time, and understand that in letting it exist in time and considering that how you think about it, you have no idea where it's going to go. It might change. It might not. Who cares? But it's your obsession with changing it, your obsession with not liking it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically just trying to kill Charlie Kirk every day, all day long in your head.
I was just thinking that. I mean, that's what was so impressive about what he did, is that he welcomed debate with people who he disagreed with.
Yeah, and that's something that you can only do when you're in a post-liberal mindset.
Yeah.
When you're in a liberal mindset, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because your opponent is Hitler.
Yeah, right. Right.
And they just deserve to be punched and killed.
Yeah.
So think about that, and that's how you feel about your anxious thoughts.
Yeah.
They deserve to be punched or killed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You say, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so we have to find peace.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I left the liberals.
Yeah.
They're not peaceful.
Yeah.
I want peace. I always wanted peace. I still want peace. I am going to get peace. And fuck liberalism because it's not peace.
Yeah. Totally.
Do you want peace?
Yes, I do want peace. I do want peace as well.
You better want
That
peace.
is what I want.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
You were not, I'm going to say this. You were not raised by tolerant people.
Yeah.
Most of us were not raised by tolerant people.
Yeah.
I was not raised by tolerant people.
Yeah.
So that journey of becoming tolerant goes all the way back to the beginning of you. All the way back to all the training, all the talking, all the teaching that you've received. And the upending of it and the escaping of it, in a sense, that's the same thing as escaping metaphysics. It is escaping metaphysics. It's the same thing. It's like you have to maintain that directionality of thought where you're going at that teaching, you're going at that training, but your goal is to subvert it and go to the side of it and ask about the truth of bang. What are the events? What are the theirs of that teaching and training? It's very psychoanalytic in a sense. It's like, what are the moments where that teaching and training was infused into me, and how can I understand the truth of those moments so that I can kind of move beyond them? And I've always thought Heidegger is really very much like in a sense of philosophical Freudianism. And for taking Freudianism more as the idea of the extrication of established reaction patterns via recollection.
Yeah, totally. I mean,
and it's not something you just snap your fingers. It's something you have to think through in time. So you say, how do you do it? Right? How do you do it? How do you do it, Kirk? How do you do it?
Yeah.
Well, you time it. You time it through. You think it through. It is you're doing it. You're doing it. It's not how do you do it. You want a manual. You want a formula, right? You want a liberal handbook.
Steps. Yeah.
Steps.
First this, then that.
You want steps. So you're still stuck in metaphysics if you're doing that.
Yeah.
You need to go to bang. You need to go to the truth of bang. You need to go to the event. You need to time instead of think. Time is a verb. That's interesting. I know. I think time now. Time is a verb where you're timing a race, or But there's another meaning to time as a verb. Think of it as synonymous with think. To time. To time. To do time. To time out. To time through. Right? And the
there's an app called Insight Timer.
Insight Timer?
Yeah, it's like a meditation app.
Yeah.
It's a good name.
Yeah, that is. And, meditation as thought that is time is very good.
Yeah.
That's very right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
I can't say I've given up the hate in my heart, but
Oh,
I'm
man.
trying.
None of us have. None of us has. And but that's all our lives.
Yeah.
Let your life be the process of timing about the hate in your heart and trying, hate in your heart. I think of hate in your heart as just like shit in your house. The more you clear out, the more room you got, the more you can breathe, the more sunshine there is. Will you ever get it all out? Maybe not, but you're at least headed in that direction. And you got a little more sunshine, you got a little more room to dance every day.
Yeah.
All right, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah. Great.
Okay,
Thank
good night.
you. Thanks for joining us for the Leaping Choya podcast. For more information, visit leapingchoya.com and be sure and follow us on socials. Until next time.